Usually when we think about the dangers of the ocean, our minds, uh, they immediately go to the external threats.
Right, like the weather.
Yeah, exactly. We picture these massive, like 50-foot rogue waves just crashing over the bow of a ship.
Oh, yeah.
We think of hurricane-force winds or, submerged reefs or freezing waters.
Yeah.
The danger is outside. And the ship itself is, well, it's the fortress,
It's the sanctuary.
right? It's the thing keeping you alive.
Absolutely. I mean, it's this multi-thousand-ton steel barrier between the sailor and a highly hostile natural environment. You're taught from day one that, as long as the hull is intact, you survive.
But then you look closer at the actual data, at the real training materials that professional mariners study. You realize that the fortress itself has teeth.
Oh, big time.
You step into the internal architecture of these massive maritime vessels, and suddenly, the biggest threat to a sailor's life isn't the raging ocean outside.
No, it's inside.
It's an invisible, silent predator waiting in the absolute still darkness inside the ship. And, for all of you listening right now, I know you love unpacking these complex, high-stakes systems as much as we do. So today, we're looking at a literal matter of life and death.
Really?
We are diving into the exact protocols designed to fight that invisible danger. We have this complete professional training presentation. It's titled Enclosed Space Entry and Rescue, prepared by Prime Epic Navigation for Ships' Officers and Crew.
And we're going to explore this not just as like a set of dry maritime rules, but as an incredible intersection of risk management, human psychology, and systematic safety culture.
Yeah.
Because standing inside a calm, quiet steel room deep in the belly of a cargo ship can actually put you in far more danger than standing on the deck in a gale.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with the fundamental definition.
Yeah.
Because what exactly are we talking about when we say enclosed space?
Right.
Because the training presentation gives us a very specific three-part criteria from the International Maritime Organization.
The IMO, yeah.
Right, the IMO. It says the space is enclosed if it has limited openings, poor ventilation, and crucially, it is not designed for continuous occupancy.
That third point is the anchor for everything else. Not designed for continuous occupancy.
What does that mean in practice, though?
Well, think about it. When shipbuilders design a bridge or a crew cabin or a galley, they're engineering it to support human biology.
Right, for people to actually live in.
Exactly. They factor in airflow, temperature control, lighting, ergonomics. But a ship is fundamentally a massive floating machine.
It makes me think of the internal gears of an old-school pocket watch.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like if you open up a pocket watch, you see all these intricate, precisely engineered cogs and springs, right?
Right.
They are absolutely essential for the machine to function. The watch cannot tell time without them. But you would never expect a tiny person to, live inside those gears.
No, of course not.
The environment wasn't made for a resident. It was made for the mechanism.
Yeah, and the spaces listed in the text: cargo holds, ballast tanks, fuel tanks, void spaces, duct keels, pump rooms, cofferdams. These are the internal gears of the ship.
Wait, let me stop you there, because for the listener who isn't, a naval architect, some of those terms sound incredibly alien.
Fair enough.
Like, what exactly is a duct keel or a cofferdam? Paint a picture of what these spaces actually look and feel like.
Okay, so imagine a duct keel as a long, narrow, dark tunnel running along the absolute bottom center of the ship.
Sounds terrifying already.
Oh, it is. It's packed with massive pipes carrying seawater, fuel, heating steam. It's claustrophobic. It's entirely made of cold, sweat-covered steel, and it has absolutely no natural light or airflow.
Wow, and a cofferdam.
A cofferdam is even more restrictive. It's essentially an empty void space built intentionally between two other tanks to prevent cross-contamination.
Like separating two different liquids.
Exactly. Say, between a drinking water tank and a heavy fuel oil tank. It might only be 2 or 3 feet wide, just a sheer drop of steel plating going down 40 feet.
So these aren't just empty rooms, they are structural voids.
Right. They hold the heavy fuel oil that powers the massive engines. They hold the seawater ballast that keeps the ship upright. They are empty voids designed purely to provide structural integrity or buoyancy.
Right.
They are entirely indifferent to human life.
Indifferent is almost like too gentle a word.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the atmospheric hazards listed in this presentation, these spaces feel actively hostile.
That's true.
Let's talk about the invisible threat, the air itself. The text breaks this down into 3 categories: oxygen deficiency, toxic gases, and flammability.
Yeah, the big 3.
Let's start with oxygen, because the numbers here are terrifying, and the biological mechanics of how it kills you are deeply unsettling.
So normal atmospheric air, the air you and I are breathing right now, is roughly 20.9% oxygen.
Okay, 20.9.
And the text states that anything below 19.5% is officially an unsafe atmosphere.
Wait, 19.5, that's barely a drop.
Exactly. So we are already talking about a very narrow margin of error, just a tiny drop, and you are officially in a hazard zone.
But why would the oxygen drop in a sealed steel tank? If it's just an empty void, where does the oxygen go?
Right. It's not like someone is in there breathing it all up.
Exactly.
It's a chemical theft. One of the most common causes of oxygen depletion in these steel tanks is simple oxidation.
Rust.
Rust. When the steel walls of a ballast tank react with the moisture in the air or the seawater residue, the chemical process of creating rust physically pulls oxygen molecules out of the air.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Yeah, if the tank is sealed for months, the rust literally consumes the breathable air.
That is wild.
But it's not just rust. If a cargo hold was carrying organic material like timber, grain, or even certain types of coal, the biological breakdown or oxidation of that cargo steals the oxygen.
So the cargo is breathing, essentially.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
You can open a hatch to a space that has been sealed for 6 weeks, and the air inside might only have 10% oxygen left.
And here is where the training text lays out the physiological horror show. Less than 16% oxygen leads to impaired judgment,
Right.
and less than 10% causes unconsciousness.
What's fascinating here is that we need to dig into the biochemistry of hypoxia, because it subverts every survival instinct we have.
How so?
Well, let's think about how the human body normally reacts to danger. If you touch a hot stove, your nerves scream in pain and your reflexes jerk your hand away.
Obviously.
If you step into a freezing room, you shiver, your teeth chatter, you seek warmth. If you hold your breath underwater, carbon dioxide builds up in your blood, which triggers a violent, panic-inducing urge to breathe.
Right. Your body has these brilliant, loud alarm systems.
Exactly. You get intense physical feedback.
But oxygen deprivation in a space where carbon dioxide isn't building up, where the oxygen is simply missing and replaced by nitrogen or another inert gas, doesn't trigger that alarm.
No, it doesn't.
You don't feel like you're suffocating.
You don't necessarily start gasping for air and panic because your body is still successfully exhaling CO2.
Which means the alarm system itself is bypassed.
It's not just bypassed. The cognitive hardware required to process the alarm shuts down.
That's terrifying.
As the oxygen in your bloodstream drops to that 16% threshold, the very first organ to suffer is your brain.
Makes sense.
The frontal lobe, which is responsible for logic, reasoning, and risk assessment, begins to starve. You lose the cognitive ability to realize you are in danger.
So what does that actually feel like for the sailors standing in the tank?
They might feel mildly confused, they might feel a strange drunken euphoria, or they might just feel slightly tired.
Just tired.
Yeah. But they are entirely incapable of rationalizing the thought, I am in an oxygen-deficient environment, my life is in immediate danger, and I need to turn around and climb out of this tank.
Because the logic center is offline.
Exactly. They lack the mental hardware to execute a self-rescue. Their brain essentially betrays them, locking them in the space.
That is horrifying. So at 16%, your brain quietly takes away your ability to save yourself.
Yeah.
And as you linger there, confused, the oxygen continues to drop in your blood. At 10%, the text says you just lose consciousness.
Your knees buckle.
You hit the steel floor, and if no one pulls you out, brain death follows in minutes. And it's entirely silent.
It is. And that is just the absence of a good thing, the lack of oxygen. We haven't even touched on the presence of bad things.
The toxic gases.
Right. The text specifically lists hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and inert gas residues.
Okay, let's talk about hydrogen sulfide, or H2S.
H2S is a nightmare.
Because when you read the literature on this specific gas, it sounds like a biological weapon that just naturally occurs on ships.
I mean, it practically is. H2S is a byproduct of the anaerobic breakdown of organic matter.
So rotting stuff.
Right. It's incredibly common in sewage systems, but on ships, it's notorious in crude oil tanks or anywhere stagnant water and organic materials sit.
Now, I've always heard that H2S smells like rotten eggs, which, sounds like a pretty clear warning system.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, like if I open a hatch and it smells like a sewer, I know not to go and read.
That's the deadly trap of H2S. At very low concentrations, yes, it smells intensely like rotten eggs.
Okay.
But it is chemically insidious. If the concentration is slightly higher, which it often is in a stagnant tank, one of the very first things H2S does when it hits your nasal passages is deaden the olfactory nerve.
Right, really.
It paralyzes your sense of smell within seconds.
Oh, wow. That's purely evil.
So you open the hatch, you take one breath and think, rotten eggs. You take a second breath and the smell is gone.
And your brain tells you the air is clear.
Right. Your brain says the bad air blew away, the smell cleared out, but the gas is still there. You just lost the physical ability to detect it.
Unbelievable.
And as you climb down the ladder, the H2S enters your bloodstream and binds to the iron in your cells, blocking them from using oxygen entirely.
So even if there is oxygen, you can't use it.
Exactly. It's a chemical asphyxiant. It shuts down your central nervous system.
The betrayal of the senses again. The environment actively lies to your brain.
Constantly.
And then we have carbon monoxide, which is completely odorless and colorless to begin with.
Yeah, CO.
You mentioned earlier that the ship is a massive machine. I assume CO is coming from engines and pumps.
Yes. Exhaust from diesel engines, portable pumps, or even smoldering fires in adjacent spaces.
Okay.
Carbon monoxide is brutal because hemoglobin, the protein in your red blood cells that carries oxygen, has an affinity for carbon monoxide that is over 200 times stronger than its affinity for oxygen.
Wait, 200 times?
200 times.
Meaning if there's both oxygen and CO in the air, your blood will actively choose to grab the poison instead of the air you need to live.
Exactly. It aggressively crowds out the oxygen in your bloodstream.
Wow.
So you, as the listener, you need to imagine walking into one of these rooms. The lights are on, the steel floor is solid, everything looks completely normal.
It's totally safe.
But the very air you are breathing is silently turning against you, either starving your brain of oxygen, chemically paralyzing your nervous system, or replacing the life-giving molecules in your blood.
And if the air isn't suffocating or poisoning you, it might just explode.
Oh, right. Flammability.
Yeah, we have to cover the flammability risk.
Yeah.
The training material mentions the lower explosive limit, or LEL, and ignition sources.
So in some of these enclosed spaces, especially fuel tanks, cargo pump rooms, or paint lockers, volatile gases slowly evaporate and pool.
Like fumes building up.
Right. The lower explosive limit is the lowest concentration of a gas or vapor that will burn or explode if a source of ignition is present.
And on a massive steel ship, an ignition source isn't just someone, like, lighting a cigarette.
Not at all. If the atmosphere has reached its LEL, all it takes is the scrape of the steel wrench against a rusted bulkhead.
Just metal on metal.
Yeah. It could be a static discharge from a crew member's synthetic coveralls. It could be a non-explosion-proof flashlight being turned on.
Just clicking a flashlight.
A single microspark. And the entire void space instantaneously becomes a combustion chamber.
So we have established the what. We have a space that is physically hostile. A narrow, dark steel tube or void filled with air that can quietly put your brain to sleep, chemically poison your bloodstream, or detonate.
That sums it up.
Knowing all of this, knowing these horrifying facts are taught to every mariner, the question the training begs is, why do fatalities still happen?
That is the core tension of the entire training presentation.
Right?
The physical dangers are defined with absolute scientific precision. But the real challenge, the variable that engineering cannot entirely control, is human nature.
The source material explicitly states that most fatalities occur because of a few very specific reasons.
Let's hear them.
Rushing, poor communication, failure to test the atmosphere, improper rescue attempts, and overconfidence.
Yeah.
When I read rushing and overconfidence, I don't see a lack of training. I see a psychological trap.
It is entirely a psychological trap, born from a concept known in safety science as the normalization of deviance.
Normalization of deviance. Okay, break that down.
Let's look at a seasoned crew. They might have entered a ballast tank to do a routine structural inspection 99 times over their career.
Right, they've done it a million times.
99 times, the heavy steel hatch was opened, they climbed down the vertical ladder, they spent 10 minutes checking the walls with a flashlight, and they climbed out.
And nothing bad happened.
Nothing bad happened.
And the human brain is an incredibly efficient pattern recognition machine. If you do something 99 times without consequence, your brain aggressively categorizes that action as safe.
Exactly. It wants to save cognitive energy. That's the danger of routine. The 100th time, maybe the vessel is behind schedule, maybe the port authorities are pressing them to finish cargo operations, or a storm is rolling in and they need to secure the deck.
So they're feeling the pressure.
Yeah. The crew knows they are supposed to spend an hour setting up ventilation and gas monitors, but they just need to pop in for 2 minutes to check a single valve.
They think, I'll be in and out.
Exactly. The overconfidence isn't arrogance, it's experience working against them.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Because the threat is invisible, their past experience tells them it isn't there.
Right. If a cargo crane is swinging wildly in high winds, you can see the danger. Your brain tells you to stay away.
You step back instinctively.
But if you look down a hatch into a quiet, well-lit pump room, it looks exactly identical, whether the air is perfectly clean or packed with lethal carbon monoxide.
Visually, it's the exact same room.
The normalization of deviance tricks them into bypassing the safety net.
It does.
But the cause of death that really stops me in my tracks when reading this manual is improper rescue attempts.
Oh, yeah, that's the hardest part to talk about.
The text points out that this is a leading cause of fatalities. And this requires a deep dive into what is arguably the most heartbreaking aspect of maritime safety.
Absolutely.
Isn't it just fundamental human nature to immediately run in to help someone you see in trouble?
It is.
If you are standing at the top of a cargo hold and you look down and see your friend, your crewmate, suddenly collapse, your first visceral instinct is to climb down that ladder and grab them.
Of course it is.
How do you train someone to fight their most basic biological empathy?
You are identifying what safety professionals call the tragedy of instinct.
The tragedy of instinct.
It is the most harrowing reality of enclosed space incidents, and it has claimed hundreds of lives throughout maritime history. We have to understand the psychology of the witness in that split second.
Put us in their shoes.
When someone collapses from oxygen deprivation or toxic gas, there's no dramatic warning. The person just quietly slumps over.
No coughing, no choking.
Usually no. So the person watching from the hatch doesn't immediately think the atmosphere is toxic.
Right, because it looks entirely peaceful.
The witness thinks, my friend just had a heart attack, or my friend slipped and hit their head on the steel deck.
The brain processes a medical emergency or a trauma, not an environmental hazard.
Exactly. And the immediate overpowering biological urge is to close the distance and render aid.
So they rush in.
They rush in. And because the air is the killer, the rescuer is now climbing down into the exact same deadly atmosphere.
And they're probably panicked, right?
Exactly. Remember what we said about the physical exertion of climbing down a ladder or rushing to help it increases your heart rate and respiration?
So they're breathing faster.
The rescuer is breathing in the toxic air or the oxygen-depleted air twice as fast as the first victim did.
Oh my God.
Within seconds, the rescuer collapses right next to the first victim.
A chain reaction of empathy leading to death.
It is incredibly common for an enclosed space fatality report to list 2, 3, or even 4 victims.
4 victims from one incident.
Yes. The first person falls, the second goes in to save them and falls. The third person sees 2 bodies, assumes they both slipped, or feels they can hold their breath long enough to drag them out, and they fall.
It's like a black hole.
The biological drive to save our own people overrides logic, and the invisible gas takes them all.
That completely explains why the International Maritime Organization guidelines stress leadership, discipline, and rigid risk awareness so heavily.
You have to.
You aren't just training people to follow rules. You are literally building an ironclad cognitive framework to override the crew's natural human impulses.
Exactly.
You are training them to be unnaturally cold in a moment of sheer panic.
This is why the massive regulatory framework exists. The presentation doesn't just pull these rules out of thin air.
Right.
It leans heavily on SOLA's The Safety of Life at Sea Convention, along with the ISM code, and specific IMO resolutions like MSC.581.
We should define these for the listener, because SOLAS and the ISM code are like the constitutional documents of the ocean, but they can sound like alphabet soup.
They really can.
What is SOLAS and why does it carry such immense weight?
So SOLAS is perhaps the most important international treaty concerning the safety of merchant ships, and its origins tell you everything you need to know about why it exists.
Okay, let's hear it.
The very first version of SOLAS was drafted in 1914. Do you know what happened just 2 years prior that forced the world to draft it?
Wait, 1912, the sinking of the Titanic.
Exactly. The Titanic disaster proved that when you put thousands of lives on massive machines in the middle of the ocean, you cannot leave safety up to the individual discretion of the shipping company.
You can't just trust them to do the right thing.
No, you need global binding mandates regarding lifeboats, watertight bulkheads, and emergency procedures.
Right.
Over the last century, as new tragedies occurred, ships catching fire, bulk carriers sinking from shifting cargo, and hundreds of sailors silently suffocating in enclosed spaces, SOLAS has been constantly updated.
So these aren't just polite suggestions from a corporate office. They're written in blood.
Every single regulation, every bullet point in this prime epic navigation training document exists because at some point in the past, someone died doing it the wrong way.
Wow.
And the international community agreed to make it illegal to ever do it that way again.
And how does the ISM code fit into this? The presentation mentions it right alongside SOLAS.
The International Safety Management Code, or ISM code, was another massive paradigm shift.
Okay.
Before the ISM code was fully implemented in the late 1990s, maritime regulations were very focused on the hardware.
The ship itself.
Right. The thickness of the steel, the number of fire extinguishers, the physical equipment. But investigations into disasters were revealing that the ships were structurally sound, but the management of the people on board was deeply flawed.
Ah, the human element.
Yes. The ISM code shifted the focus to software, meaning the human operating system.
Oh, I like that. The human operating system.
It required every shipping company to develop a formal safety management system. It forced them to write down specific procedures for dangerous tasks, ensuring that safety wasn't just left to the captain's intuition.
It had to be standardized.
Standardized and auditable.
Which brings us directly to the armor provided in this training, the ultimate result of the ISM code for this specific danger.
The procedure.
Right. The text introduces the Enclosed Space Entry Procedure, or ESEP. It is a rigid 6-step process that must be followed every single time a sailor crosses the threshold of a tank.
It is the absolute core of the training.
Let's walk through it because the mechanics here are fascinating. Step 1 is the risk assessment.
Before a wrench is lifted.
Before anyone even touches the dogs on a steel hatch, the crew has to sit down and identify the specific hazards of the space they intend to enter and evaluate the controls.
Exactly.
The slide lists some very specific variables they have to consider: previous cargo, cleaning chemicals, temperature, and ventilation capability.
Yes.
Let's dig into the chemistry here. Why does the previous cargo matter so much if the space is technically empty now?
Because the history of a space dictates its invisible present.
Okay, break that down.
We talked about rust-consuming oxygen, but organic cargoes are incredibly volatile. Let's say a massive bulk carrier just finished discharging a load of wood chips or logs.
Is regular wood.
Right. Wood is constantly respiring. As it breaks down, it actively consumes massive amounts of oxygen and releases carbon dioxide.
So even after the logs are completely removed, the air left behind in that massive cavernous hold has been chemically stripped of oxygen.
Exactly. And you can't just sweep it out. Furthermore, steel is porous at a microscopic level, and structural webs in tanks trap residues.
Oh, so it lingers in the metal.
If a chemical tanker was carrying something toxic, the walls themselves might be holding on to toxic vapors.
Yikes.
If the crew washed the tank with a specific solvent, that solvent might have reacted with the remaining cargo residue to create an entirely new, highly toxic gas.
It's like a chemistry experiment gone wrong.
The risk assessment forces the crew to look backwards in time to predict the current state of the invisible air.
You cannot look at an empty room and assume it's empty. You have to interrogate its history.
Well said.
Which leads to step 2, the permit to work, or PTW. I am looking at the checklist for a valid permit to work in the source material, and it is overwhelmingly detailed.
It is deliberately exhaustive. It is an administrative fortress designed to slow the crew down.
A valid permit to work must clearly detail, and I'm just going to read the list here, the exact space identification, the specific hazards and controls identified in Step 1, a detailed ventilation plan, the precise gas testing results, the required personal protective equipment, a communication plan, the designated standby personnel, and a fully vetted rescue plan.
That's a lot, right? And it must be signed off by the master or a designated responsible officer.
I look at this like a pre-flight checklist in commercial aviation.
That's the perfect analogy.
When a pilot gets into a 737, they don't just kick the tires, assume they remember how to fly because they have 10,000 hours in the seat, and push the throttle.
No, they'd be fired instantly.
Right. They physically pull out a clipboard or an iPad and verbally check off every single critical system.
Check, check, check.
The permit to work does the exact same thing for entering the ship's internal gears. It removes human memory and human arrogance from the equation.
It forces objective verification.
You can't say, I think we're good. You have to prove it on paper.
And that paper requires hard scientific data. Which brings us to step 3, atmosphere testing.
This is where it gets really technical.
Very, because the margin between life and death comes down to the calibration of a small electronic box.
The text mandates a very specific test sequence using a calibrated multi-gas detector. The order is 1. Oxygen, 2. Flammability, 3. Toxicity.
Yes.
I was wondering about the specific order. If H2S is so instantly lethal, why not test for toxicity first?
That comes down to the physical mechanics of the sensors themselves.
Okay.
A lot of multi-gas detectors use catalytic bead sensors to measure flammability. These sensors actually burn a tiny amount of the gas inside the machine to measure how explosive it is.
Oh, that's wild. It's like a microscopic controlled explosion inside the handheld device.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for that microcombustion to occur, the sensor requires a minimum level of oxygen in the atmosphere.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If you stick the gas detector into a space that is completely flooded with an explosive gas, like methane, but the space has zero oxygen, the methane won't burn inside the sensor.
Because fire needs oxygen,
Right. So the machine might give a false reading of 0% flammability.
which is incredibly dangerous. The machine says it's not explosive, but the moment you open the hatch and let fresh oxygen rush in, it becomes a bomb.
Precisely. The equipment needs oxygen to give you accurate data about flammability.
That makes total sense.
Furthermore, oxygen is the absolute baseline requirement for biological life. If there is no oxygen, the toxicity doesn't even matter yet. The environment is already lethal to human biology. You always establish the baseline of life support first.
Okay, let's unpack the physical mechanics of how this testing is done. Because the text specifies that you must test at the top, the middle, and the bottom of the space.
Oh, yes, all three levels.
Why is that? If the air at the door is good, why isn't the whole room good?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of physics, we realize that the atmosphere inside an enclosed space is almost never a uniform mixture.
Okay.
Gases have different molecular weights, they have different densities. Without active ventilation mixing them up, they stratify into distinct layers. It forms a sinister layer cake of atmospheric hazards.
Layer cake of poison.
Exactly. Some gases, like methane, are significantly lighter than air.
So they float.
If methane is leaking into a space, it will rise and accumulate in a concentrated pocket at the very top, trapped against the ceiling.
Got it.
Conversely, toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide or solvent vapors are heavier than air. They will sink,
They subbed.
they cascade down the bulkheads like invisible waterfalls and pool at the absolute bottom of the tank, creeping into the lowest corners and remaining completely undisturbed.
So let's play out the scenario where a crew skips the middle and bottom tests.
A fatal mistake.
They crack the hatch at the top of a 30-foot deep tank. They drop the gas monitor in just 3 feet down. It reads perfect oxygen, zero toxicity.
The layer cake is undisturbed. The top layer is perfectly breathable air.
So the officer signs the permit to work. The crew climbs over the lip of the hatch and starts descending the vertical ladder.
They feel completely safe.
They breathe fine for the first 20 feet. But as they reach the floor of the tank 30 feet down, their boots hit the steel plates and their heads descend perfectly into a concentrated, heavy pool of invisible, lethal hydrogen sulfide.
And they collapse instantly.
Man.
A single test at the door is a deadly illusion. It provides a false sense of security, which, as we discussed with the normalization of deviance, is the most dangerous psychological state a crew can be in.
Right.
This is exactly why the ESEP protocol demands tests at all vertical levels before entry, using a drop line to lower the sensor deep into the void. And crucially, it demands continuous monitoring during the entry as well.
Because the environment isn't static.
Not at all. The very act of entering the space changes the environment.
Yeah.
A crew member walking across the bottom of a tank or using a scraper to remove rust from a bulkhead can disturb sludge that has been sitting there for months.
Stirring it up.
That mechanical disturbance can suddenly release trapped pockets of toxic gas into the air. The atmosphere can literally turn lethal while you are standing in the middle of it.
That is deeply unsettling. The ground you walk on can betray you.
It really can.
So we have done the risk assessment. We have filled out the massive permit to work checklist. We have dropped the sensor to the top, middle, and bottom and confirmed the air is safe.
Everything's green.
Now we move into execution. What actually happens when a human being crosses the threshold into the void?
This brings us to steps 4 and 5 of the enclosed space entry procedure: ventilation and safe entry.
Step 4 is ventilation. The text says it can be forced or natural, and it must continue during the entire entry.
Yes, that's critical.
The duration of this ventilation prior to entry depends on the size of the space, the previous cargo, and the gas test results. I imagine forced ventilation is basically hooking up massive industrial-grade fans to the hatch.
Yeah, large blowers connected to long, flexible canvas ducting that is dropped deep into the tank. You are forcefully exchanging the stagnant internal atmosphere with fresh ocean air.
Switching it out.
And you must ensure the exhaust air has a clear path out, creating a continuous sweeping cycle. Keeping it running during the entry is critical to ensure that any new gases disturbed by the crew's work are immediately diluted and flushed out of the space before they can reach lethal concentrations.
And then, step 5, safe entry. The slide details incredibly strict requirements here.
Very strict.
Only trained personnel may enter. A mandatory safety harness and lifeline must be worn. An attendant must be posted outside.
Right.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The bullet point that actually stops me in my tracks. No entry without a valid PTW.
Why did that one stand out to you?
Because it essentially turns a piece of paper into a physical barrier.
Oh, I see what you mean.
The text doesn't say, try to have the paperwork done before you start the job.
Yeah.
It makes the administrative safety net an absolute physical prerequisite.
Yeah.
If the permit to work isn't signed by the master, the space effectively does not exist. You cannot put your boots on the ladder. It's a brilliant way to force compliance by making the bureaucracy the literal key to the lock.
It creates a culture of permission rather than a culture of assumption.
Exactly.
You don't assume the tank is safe because you ventilated it. You scientifically prove it, you document the proof, and only then are you granted permission to proceed.
But even with that hard-won permission, you aren't going in alone. Even if you're the only one climbing down, the system demands that you are tethered to the outside world.
Literally tethered.
The mandatory safety harness and lifeline. And that brings us to step 6, monitoring during entry. We need to spend some time talking with the attendant posted outside the hatch.
The attendant, sometimes called the standby person or the whole watch, is perhaps the most crucial piece of the operational puzzle once the entry begins.
The training text says the attendant must maintain continuous gas monitoring, maintain direct visual or radio communication, keep an accurate tally of personnel inside, and crucially, stop the entry if conditions change.
We really need to analyze the immense psychological burden placed on this individual.
It's heavy.
The attendant standing at the hatch is not just a passive observer checking a box on a clipboard. They are the sole lifeline for the crew inside. They are the anchor to the living world.
Imagine standing there. You were looking down a dark 24-inch circular manhole.
Just a tiny circle.
Your crewmates are 30 feet down inside a steel cavern. The heavy machinery of the ship is humming around you, vibrating the deck plates. You have a radio in one hand and a secondary gas monitor in the other.
And you have to remain hyper-vigilant for the entire duration of the work.
No breaks.
It might be a 2-hour job. You cannot get distracted. You cannot look at your phone. You cannot go grab a coffee from the mess hall. You cannot assume someone else is watching.
Right.
Because if the gas monitor down in the hole suddenly spikes, or if the radio check goes unanswered for even 30 seconds, the attendant is the one who has to make the call.
They have the ultimate authority and the ultimate responsibility to scream, "Get out!" into the radio and pull the emergency alarm.
And they are also the first and only line of defense against the tragedy of instinct we discussed earlier.
Oh, man. You're right.
If the crew inside suddenly collapses, the attendant is the one standing right there looking at their bodies.
That's gut-wrenching.
They are the one who will feel that overwhelming, blinding biological urge to dive through the manhole and save their friends.
They have to stand at the edge of the hole, watch their crewmates dying, and actively choose not to go in.
They have to stand their ground, hit the alarm, and initiate the rescue protocol from the outside. If the attendant fails that psychological test and goes in, the entire system collapses and everyone dies.
Which perfectly transitions us into the reality of when the system does fail.
Right. Because it does happen.
Despite all 6 steps of the ESEP, despite the forced ventilation, the continuous testing, the permits, and the vigilant attendant, things can still go catastrophically wrong.
The maritime environment is just too volatile.
Systems fail, hoses tear, uncharted pockets of gas are breached. So how does the protocol handle the terrifying moment an emergency actually occurs?
The worst case scenario.
What is the exact mechanical process to get that body out of the tank before brain death occurs?
It handles it with absolute uncompromising rigidity, because this is the moment where human panic is most likely to override rational thought, and the rules have to act as a straitjacket for that panic.
The presentation lays out the golden rule of rescue in bold, unmistakable text. Never enter an enclosed space to rescue without proper equipment.
That is the bedrock of the entire manual. Everything else flows from that single command.
I want to ask you, the listener, right now to reflect back on our earlier discussion about hypoxia. Remember how we talked about impaired judgment? How the gas disables your brain's alarm system?
And remember the natural empathy that drives a person to try and save their fallen crewmate.
This golden rule exists to build a mental brick wall against those exact human vulnerabilities.
It does.
It is the protocol screaming at the crew, we know you want to help, but if you go in there barefaced, you will die and you will help no one. You will just add to the body count.
Exactly. The rescue plan outlined in the text requires a fully trained rescue team, SCBA self-contained breathing apparatus, which provides a dedicated air supply entirely independent of the toxic atmosphere.
Like scuba gear, but for air.
Right. A tripod, a mechanical retrieval system, a clear communication plan, and gas detectors.
There is a very specific, carefully worded phrase in the rescue section of the text here that I want to dissect. It says, non-entry rescue preferred.
This raises an important question. Yeah.
If you have all this highly specialized equipment, the SCDA gear, the trained team, the backup air bottles, why is non-entry still the preferred method?
Right. If you are wearing a mask that gives you perfect clean air, why not just suit up, climb down the ladder, and grab the victim?
Because every single time a human being crosses that threshold into a lethal atmosphere, the risk matrix multiplies exponentially.
Even with the gear.
Even with SCBA gear, mechanical systems can fail. An airline can rupture. A mask can be dislodged in the tight claustrophobic confines of a duct keel as the rescuer twists around a pipe.
Oh, if it gets snagged.
Visibility might be absolute zero due to smoke or heavy vapor. By sending rescuers inside, you are introducing more fragile human bodies into a completely lethal environment.
You are actively risking the creation of a second, third, or fourth victim, even with the best gear in the world.
Exactly. Non-entry rescue is preferred because it relies on the mechanical equipment we discussed earlier, the safety harness and the lifeline attached to the person before they ever went in.
Ah, so that's why they wear it. If someone collapses, the preferred method is for the team on the outside to use the mechanical advantage of the tripod and winch to literally haul the victim out by their lifeline without anyone else having to breathe the toxic air or navigate the dark space.
It sounds brutal.
It is.
You are talking about dragging a 200-pound unconscious human being, dead weight, up a 30-foot vertical shaft, potentially scraping against steel ladders and bulkheads on the way up.
It is incredibly brutal. It is mechanically violent, but it guarantees that no one else dies trying to save them.
Wow.
It is the cold, calculated arithmetic of survival. When brain death is ticking closer with every single second of hypoxia, you do not have time for a delicate extraction. You need them out of the lethal atmosphere immediately.
To make sure this cold arithmetic becomes pure muscle memory, the training text outlines rigid drill requirements under SOLAs.
Yes, the drills.
Enclosed space rescue drills must be conducted every 2 months.
Every 2 months is a very high frequency for maritime drills.
Really?
A lot of major emergency drills are done quarterly or semi-annually.
The drills have to include a detailed scenario briefing, actual atmosphere testing of a simulated space, donning the heavy SCBA gear, an entry simulation, and actual casualty retrieval.
Hands-on practice.
They are literally practicing hauling a simulated body out of a tank every 60 days.
And that high frequency is absolutely vital because it combats a physiological and psychological reality called skill fade.
Skill fade. Walk us through what that actually looks like in a life or death moment.
In a high-stress emergency, when alarms are blaring and someone you know is lying motionless at the bottom of a tank, your heart rate spikes to 160 beats per minute.
Pure adrenaline.
At that level of stress, your fine motor skills degrade rapidly, your peripheral vision tunnels, your higher cognitive abilities plummet.
You can't think straight.
There is a saying in tactical training, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training.
So if you have to think about how to turn on the air tank, you've already failed.
Exactly. If you haven't put on an SCBA mask, tightened the straps, checked the seal, and operated the locking carabiner on a winch in 6 months, Your hands are going to shake.
You'll fumble it.
You will fumble with the clips. You will forget the sequence of operations, and seconds will tick by. And as we know, with severe oxygen deprivation, seconds mean irreversible brain death.
Right.
Conducting these drills every 2 months ensures the physical actions are purely automatic. The crew doesn't have to think, their hands just do the work.
We have covered the physical dangers of hypoxia and toxic gas. We've covered the psychological traps of routine and instinct.
We've covered a lot.
We've dissected the massive administrative checklist of the ESEP, the intricate physics of gas testing, the mechanical violence of a non-entry rescue, and the physiological reality of skill fade.
Yeah.
But there is an overarching theme here, a philosophy that dictates whether any of these brilliant engineering controls and administrative checklists are actually followed in the real world.
Because if they aren't followed, they don't matter.
Right. You can have the most comprehensive manuals in the world and the most perfectly calibrated multi-gas detectors. But if the culture aboard the vessel prioritizes speed over safety, the manuals are just paperweights.
Exactly.
The training presentation dedicates a major section to leadership expectations. It lists the requirement for a strong safety culture, proactive hazard identification, clear communication, and accountability.
Oh, good stuff.
But there's one bullet point that fundamentally alters the reality of life at sea: empowerment to stop unsafe work.
That is arguably the most revolutionary concept in the entire presentation, and perhaps the hardest to actually implement.
Let's analyze why. We have to think about the historical sociology of a ship.
Okay.
For hundreds of years, maritime culture has been a strict, uncompromising hierarchy. The master of the vessel, the captain, is absolute law.
The final word.
The officers give orders, and the crew executes them without question. It's a military-style chain of command designed to maintain order in chaotic environments.
Right. For centuries, unquestioning obedience was considered the highest virtue of a sailor. You don't debate orders during a typhoon.
But this training explicitly empowers any crew member, regardless of rank, even the lowest ranking, youngest junior seaman, standing as the attendant at the hatch, to look at a senior engineering officer or even the captain and say, no.
No! The work stops!
The conditions have changed. The gas monitor beeped. The work stops right now, and everyone gets out.
It requires a monumental shift in how power operates on a vessel.
Huge shift.
Empowering the lowest-ranking crew member to stop a massive multi-million-dollar maritime operation, an operation that might be costing the shipping company thousands of dollars an hour in port delays, means that the organization has fundamentally, structurally agreed that safety supersedes schedule every single time.
And it supersedes ego, too.
Oh, definitely.
A veteran chief mate with 30 years of experience has to be trained to accept being told no by a 20-year-old subordinate when it comes to enclosed space safety. That is not an easy cultural pivot.
It takes immense psychological safety to build that kind of operational safety.
Psychological safety.
The crew has to believe, truly believe, down to their bones, that they won't be fired, demoted, or reprimanded for stopping the work.
If they hesitate, it's over.
If there's even a hint of retaliation from management for delaying a job to check the ventilation one more time, the entire system collapses. The attendant will stay quiet, the crew will enter a toxic tank to save time, and people will die.
To reinforce this culture, the presentation includes a very specific directive for the instructor delivering the training.
What's that?
The manual mandates the inclusion of 2 to 3 real-world, anonymized case studies. It requires the instructor to present exactly what happened, what went wrong, and the systemic lessons learned from actual fatal incidents.
Why do you think the training explicitly mandates real-world case studies? Why not just use hypothetical scenarios?
Because hypotheticals are easy to dismiss. Human beings are incredibly good at distancing themselves from imaginary danger. But when you stand in front of a crew and narrate a true story, it shatters the "it won't happen to me" mindset. I think to really grasp the weight of this training, we need to narrate exactly the kind of case studies an instructor would use.
Let's do it. Let's look at the anatomy of a typical enclosed space disaster.
I'll set the scene for the first one. Let's call it Case Study Alpha.
Okay.
It's a large bulk carrier anchored offshore, waiting to load cargo. The chief officer orders a routine inspection of a forward ballast tank. This is a tank that has been sealed shut for 6 months since the last inspection.
6 months?
It's made of bare steel, and there's a layer of residual seawater and sludge at the bottom.
The perfect environment for severe oxidation and oxygen depletion.
All right. The bosun and an able seaman are assigned the task. They're experienced. They've done this a dozen times.
Ah.
But they are rushing because the captain wants the inspection done before the ship moves to the loading berth in 2 hours.
Normalization of deviance kicks in.
Exactly. They open the heavy steel manhole cover. The bosun decides to skip the permit to work process.
Oh, no.
He figures, we're just going down to the first landing to shine a flashlight around. We'll be in there for 60 seconds.
Fatal error.
He doesn't lower a gas monitor. He just steps onto the ladder and starts climbing down.
He bypasses the administrative lock and the scientific data.
10 feet down, the bosun suddenly goes silent. His hands slip from the rungs and he falls backward, landing on the steel grating 20 feet below.
Hypoxia.
The able seaman, standing at the top of the hatch, peers down. He sees his boss lying motionless. He doesn't smell anything strange. He assumes the bosun slipped and suffered a head injury.
And here comes the tragedy of instinct.
Instinct takes over. The seaman immediately climbs into the hole to help him.
He rushes in.
The seaman reaches the grating, kneels next to the bosun, takes 3 heavy breaths of the dead, oxygen-depleted air, and collapses on top of him.
Awful.
30 minutes later, the chief officer comes looking for them, sees the open hatch, sees the 2 bodies, and sounds the alarm. A rescue team eventually retrieves them using SCBA gear and winches. Both men are declared dead from profound hypoxia.
The lessons learned there are brutally clear.
Yeah.
The normalization of deviance steeping the permit because of perceived urgency, the failure to test the atmosphere, allowing the invisible threat to remain hidden, and the improper rescue attempt, turning one fatality into 2.
Let's look at a second one. Case study Bravo.
All right.
This highlights the insidious nature of toxic gas in cargo history. A general cargo ship has just discharged a load of agricultural products, specifically treated timber logs.
The timber we talked about earlier.
Right. The hold is massive, 80 feet deep. The cargo is completely gone, and the cavernous space looks totally empty.
But the timber has been slowly releasing carbon monoxide and absorbing oxygen for the entire 3-week voyage.
A junior engineer is sent to the bottom of the hold to retrieve a heavy lashing chain that was left behind by the stevedores. The crew actually does a gas test this time.
Okay, that's good.
They drop a monitor just inside the hatch door. It reads 20.9% oxygen. Perfect. They issue the permit. The engineer climbs down the 80-foot ladder.
Wait, but they only tested the top layer of the keg.
Exactly. They didn't test the middle or the bottom.
Oh, boy.
As the engineer reaches the floor of the hold, he steps into a massive, invisible, heavy pool of carbon monoxide that has settled at the lowest point.
Because CO pools.
Because CO is completely odorless, he has no idea. The carbon monoxide aggressively bonds to his hemoglobin, crowding out the oxygen in his blood. He feels slightly dizzy, sits down on the steel floor to catch his breath, and quietly loses consciousness.
And because he was sent down alone to grab a chain, there might not have been a dedicated attendant watching him continuously.
He isn't found for 2 hours.
He's gone.
He's dead. The lesson learned. Testing only the top of the space creates a deadly illusion of safety. Gas stratification is real, and continuous monitoring at the level of the worker is non-negotiable.
When an instructor stands in front of a crew and narrates those stories, it cuts through the abstraction.
It makes it real.
It grounds all the acronyms, the SOLAs, the IMO, the ESEP into grim, undeniable reality.
Yeah.
The anonymized nature removes the blame from specific individuals and refocuses the attention on the systemic failures. It allows the crew to see themselves in the narrative.
And realize that the rules are the only thing keeping them from becoming a slide in next year's training presentation.
Exactly.
It's a terrifying reality check.
Yeah.
A stark reminder that the invisible predator in the hull is always waiting, patient and indifferent.
Yeah.
And the only thing keeping it at bay is absolute, unwavering discipline to the procedure.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize everything we've unpacked today from the Prime Epic Navigation Training Manual.
It means we have to redefine how we view the physical architecture of a ship.
We do.
Enclosed spaces are profoundly deadly. They are the internal, indifferent gears of a massive machine, entirely unsuitable for human life.
It means the procedures, the meticulous risk assessment of past cargoes, the rigid, unyielding permit-to-work checklist, the continuous forced ventilation must be followed every single time without exception.
It means you never, ever bypass atmospheric testing. You never assume the air is safe just because it looks clear, or because it smells fine, or because you've been in that exact tank 100 times before.
Right. Stratified toxic gases and rust-driven oxygen depletion are silent, invisible killers that disable your brain before you even know you are under attack.
It means you must never attempt to rescue without proper equipment. You have to fight the deepest, most tragic instinct of human empathy,
Mhm.
because running into a void space unprotected only guarantees the creation of another victim.
And ultimately, it means safety is a holistic team effort.
It really is.
It requires a radical shift in maritime culture where every single person, regardless of rank, is empowered to halt an operation, where communication is flawless, and where the heavy burden of vigilance is shared.
The final slide of the presentation summarizes it with a grim simplicity. Stay alert. Stay alive.
A powerful, uncompromising mandate.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought.
I love these.
Something to mull over that builds on the incredible tension we've explored today between rigid mechanical procedure and flawed human psychology.
I think the intersection of human behavior and perfect systems is where the most profound questions lie. Let's hear it.
The training text makes it incredibly clear that overconfidence is a leading cause of enclosed space fatalities. Complacency, the normalization of deviance, is the ultimate enemy.
Yes.
Yet to fight this psychological complacency, the protocol prescribes an incredibly thorough, highly regimented, almost perfect six-step checklist, the ESAP.
Right.
It gives the crew meticulously calibrated multi-gas detectors, massive forced ventilation plans, structured permits, and dedicated attendants.
It builds a literal fortress of administrative and physical safety.
Exactly, but here's the philosophical question. Does the successful completion of such an exhaustive, perfect checklist inadvertently breed the very psychological overconfidence the text warns against?
Oh, that's interesting.
If a crew flawlessly executes the permit to work, drops the sensor to the exact correct depths, and perfectly sets up the continuous ventilation, do they step onto that ladder feeling a little too safe?
It's a paradox.
How do we build systems that are robust enough to make us secure without making us feel invincible? Because the moment we feel invincible, the moment we stop fearing the dark, silent voids inside the ship, that is the exact moment the invisible predator strikes.
That is a phenomenal question to carry forward. It really highlights the fragile, paradoxical balance at the heart of all high-stakes environments. The tool meant to keep you vigilant might be the very thing that lulls you to sleep.
Thank you for diving deep with us into this source material. We started by looking at a ship as a mighty fortress built to withstand the raging ocean. And we discovered that sometimes the most profound dangers are the invisible ones hiding in the quiet dark right beneath our feet. We will see you on the next deep dive.